ICQ Podcast episode 252, QRP Labs. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, the 252nd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris M0TCH, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature regarding QRP Labs. Well, as always, we'd like to thank our donors who help keep us advert free. They're here for the podcast show, and it's the monthly and annual subscription donors we thank this episode. And I say thank you very much, guys, for keeping the show advert free. You can do your bit by keeping the show advert free and helping us pay our hosting costs by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send away is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Chris, Dan, and Ed to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including repeater network shutdown and FCC scraps telegraph regulations. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 252 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight I have Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Good evening. How are we all doing tonight?
Hopefully pretty well, Chris. Good to have you on. I have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi, and good to have you on, Dan. It's always a pleasure. And also I have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP, all the way from Germany. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, good evening.
And how you doing?
Yeah, not so bad.
That's good. That's good. Well, we're short of Mr. Martin Rothwell this episode, M0SGL. Unfortunately, his lady booked him out to do something else. And then unfortunately realised it was a podcast weekend and he couldn't get out of it. So he'll be back with us another time. But he was on the last episode as well, which was an extra one. Or he was involved with it, but though you didn't hear his voice, he was certainly there. First news story, imminent shutdown of 7 repeaters. Now, the South Yorkshire Repeater Group have taken an unprecedented decision to shut down their whole repeater network. Chris, you've used at least one of these repeaters, probably a couple of them, when you go north to see family. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's a real shame. Obviously, they've not explained why, but it's a real shame that they're stopping the repeaters. So, like I say, I've certainly used, so there's a whole bunch of repeaters that they have. I think there were 4 repeaters, one of which is quite a sophisticated D-Star repeater with multiple modules in it, and I've certainly used that in the past, and also at least one of the analog repeaters there. They've all got great coverage and are pretty well managed, so it's a bit of a shame that they're no longer going to be available. It's good to say that they're offering them to other groups if they want to provide financing on their time to take them over. So a bit of a shame that they're not going to be available in the future, but hopefully they'll find somebody else to come along and pick up the baton, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, Ed, when you're over in the UK, I think your brother lives up kind of that sort of way, doesn't he? Do you use any of these?
Yeah, I very rarely have the radio gear with me, certainly not for VHF anyway. So, no, I don't get around to reusing these. Although, looking at where they are actually pretty close to the motorways, and obviously very useful for people who still do use repeaters. But I think it's good that they're actually coming out and saying this and then looking for other people to possibly take over some or all of them to keep them running. But they've also cancelled the Great Northern Hamfest, which is the Hamfest, the rally that they run each year. So I would guess the whole group is closing down, but we haven't actually got that information. But it's a sad time. It's a sign of the times, perhaps, that they're not getting the support they need.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of work to put a repeater on and keep it running, and as a repeat group. And although we keep bringing youngsters in the hobby, predominantly, most of us are not getting any younger, including me. But it's a real shame that the Great Northern Hamfest is also gone, because that's another Hamfest gone. Dan, it doesn't kind of affect you being not in the UK, but do you have lots of repeaters shut down in your part of the world, or what?
Well, yeah, so I'm thinking that this is just sort of a symptom of a couple of factors. One, the lower repeater usage, but two, clubs not really planning for succession. You know what I mean? Like it sound, and I'm just speculating here, but it sounds like maybe there was a group of guys that ran this club and the repeaters. They, for whatever reason, they may not have gotten any young people to join them. And now, like you say, it's a lot of work. They just don't want to do it anymore. And so I guess the lesson here would be if you have a club, you got to keep new members coming in, and you've got to train them to do things like repeaters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, divvy the work out is effectively what needs to be done. And the clubs shouldn't rely on just individuals, or groups shouldn't just rely on individuals. But if anybody is interested in getting involved with or looking toward to taking over some of these repeaters, Ernie, G4LUE, is your man. I'm sure he'll be on QRZ. Or contactable via various means.
One here, Martin, if you can email comms@southyorkshirerepeatergroup.co.uk.
Yeah,
there's a link. We'll put a link on it, I guess, as well in the show notes, I guess, Martin. Yeah.
We certainly will. But as I say, that email address, as Chris said, comms@southyorkshirerepeatergroup, all one word, .co.uk, and the gentleman is Ernie, and his call sign G4LUE. Real shame.
Yeah, I think it was Ernie that ran the Hamfest, actually.
Yeah.
Rather than specifically the repeaters.
But he
so
might
yeah,
be
comms at South Yorkshire Repeatergroup.co.uk. Anybody that can take over one or more of the repeaters and keep them running.
Yeah. So real shame, but let's hope somebody takes it over. Second news story, and I found this really strange, and it's either a bombshell or not. But final BBC operating licence revealed by Ofcom, and it talks about what they're going to have to do as of the 1st of January 2018, and it's kind of Ofcom are telling them that they've got to run certain programmes, and it's almost like Ofcom are telling them, yes, you've got to run so much news, and this radio station has to do this, and this radio station has to do that. I just found it very, very strange. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, we discussed this before, and I the same sort of feeling. Why should Ofcom decide what content radio stations put out? But of course, as Ofcom, we're working out, we think it's actually a quango, so it's not directly part of the civil service, but sort of controlled by the government. Perhaps this order is coming down from above. Just to mention, it's the BBC radio stations that are covered by this, so Radio 1, Radio 2 and so on, rather than the TV. And it seems that a group called RIG have gone to Ofcom as a pressure group, saying, look, we want Radio Independence Group representing audio material producers around the UK. Have gone to Ofcom and said, look, we need the BBC radio stations to change what they cover, so they're not just mainstream, but actually perhaps give more chance to new artists and different kinds of music, and more news and more social related actions. It looks like Ofcom have basically come out on their side and said, yeah, BBC, as of 1st of next year, your radio stations need to do this.
Yeah.
So I believe the BBC, of course, not being a commercial organisation, BBC is paid for by the licence fee, has that sort of mandate, or has it's part of its licences. It does have to, produce a wide range of content. It can't just go for the big rating stuff. It has to produce content for certain groups, and I think this is kind of the RIGs are a group, the Radio Independence Group, are a group that essentially represent people that produce content for radio programs, not just the BBC, but across the whole of the broadcasting spectrum, and they're pressing Ofcom to say, well, they want to make sure the BBC are operating under their license, and this is a result. So I think in the past, this story seems to suggest there were certain quotas in terms of they had to have a certain quota of comedy or drama or other types of content, and I think that may have been dropped. And this is just maybe Ofcom reminding BBC that they need to ensure that they have that wide range of content, not just going for the stuff that gets the big audiences.
Yeah, but can I just throw one other thing in here? These are national stations. You go for the big stuff on the national stations. I mean, in London, we have BBC Radio London that covers London. They play some phenomenally obscure stuff that isn't mainstream. They have lots of things that are London related, and news and talks and all those sort of things. So, but surely that would be where this stuff should be on the local stations. And the other... The other thing I was going to say is, and this is tongue-in-cheek, is when are they going to start telling Radio 3, which is the national classical music station, that they've got to play rap music?
So I think what the RRG, I think, are trying to promote is, rather than going always with the mainstream content and the established performers, for example, they're trying to give, I guess, a bit of a chance to some of the less known talent to get an airing, and perhaps that's a way of developing their exposure. So I think that's where I think they've done a good job, essentially, to get Ofcom to do this. So I don't know, Dan, is there a similar thing over in the States? Does the FCC do a similar thing? I don't quite know how it works with the US radio stations.
No, we don't. We have nothing like that. Even NPR, which is National Public Radio, is not really a governmental organization. They receive a little bit of funding from the government, but most of their funding comes from listeners and corporations. So there's no kind of restrictions like that at all over here.
Right. So I think it's an interesting thing. I still think that you run your national radio with all your mainstream stuff that everybody wants to listen to, and then the non-mainstream stuff surely would be done by your local station. But hey hum, this group has managed to convince Ofcom, so I'm sure that's the way it's going to be. Moving on, amateur radio recognised in the Norwegian Resource Register. Now, if I understand this right, Norway's producing a resource register in case they have an emergencies, and obviously police, fire, ambulance, hospitals, all those sort of places are going to be in this registry. But also amateur radio. Now, we're not 100% sure, but it could look like it's going to be like a big directory, I would guess. Dan, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. In a way, I'm kind of surprised it wasn't in the registry to begin with.
Yeah.
Amateur radio has always been a resource for emergency communications, so kind of surprised.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping, and I don't know, maybe somebody from Norway could probably tell us, is there an organisation in Norway that's similar to our RayNet or your races? In which case they should be in the book, I would have thought.
Yeah, I sort of agree with Dan on this one. So, yeah, I mean, if they weren't already in there, then why is that? Because, as we all know, amateur radio's got an awful lot to offer when it comes to emergencies. So, I'm sort of surprised, like you, Dan, that they weren't already in the list. But sounds like a very useful thing, like, a register of resources that can be called upon in the event of a problem. And I don't know if they have a similar thing over here in the UK or other parts of the world, but certainly, if someone's got something to offer, then, in the event of a problem, you pull the book out and say, okay, well, in this part of this area, we have a person that can do, communications. That could be a really useful thing to have.
Yeah, well, I think in the UK, they would go to people like RayNet because they're already set up as an organisation. Now, there's probably, in a real bad situation, there's no reason why you and I couldn't volunteer to RayNet. I would suggest, not wishing to upset any RayNet people, but there's no reason why we couldn't offer our help in times of real emergency. Ed, you did a really good job of pronouncing the NRL, what it stood for. I'm going to put you on the spot and let you have a go.
Well, since I'm looking at the Google translated version of it, I don't have that in front of me anymore. But one thing crossed my mind is whether they were registering individuals. But it looks like the NRRL are looking to set up a structured regional organisation, and so that they're actually getting a sort of regional coordinators, if you like, and things like this in place that the local police force can contact. Yeah, and we've got actually that Trond LA4PGA and Kenneth LB4UG are the administrators at the top level, and it looks like they're trying to build up the structure below them on a regional basis so that the groups are actually related to local police groups. So a police station somewhere would know the amateurs in this register that are locally available to provide services. And that's it doesn't look like at the moment like a full-blown Raynet or Wyson or Aries or Races set up. It's more purely a register, and two people are organising it for the NRRL. I guess you have to apply to go into the register, not that they're going to put every single amateur in there. So, by the fact this is a news item that's come up, I take it there wasn't one before. But as we said, if we've got any listeners in Norway that can correct us on that, please let us know.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I'm glad there's a register, or will be a register, because it's no good taking the call book or QRZ or whatever, because there are lots of amateurs that are not active in the call book, and I'm sure, and I'm not knocking QRZ, but I'm sure that's another big resource we'd look up. Amateurs in an area, and there may be amateurs in the area, but they might not be active anymore. So, having a
even able to assist in emergencies if they don't have any kind of emergency power or such.
Correct. You've got to have the right gear. I mean, it's probably, if somebody is only interested in, say, microwaves, the chances of nothing wrong with microwaves, but the chances of working somebody else on microwaves is not going to be as great as if somebody has, say, a 2-meter or HF rig. You've got more chances. So, I agree with you, Dan. It has to be the right equipment and all the other right infrastructure around it. Have you got portable power? Do you keep your batteries fully charged and all those sort of things? So,
and then the person's got to be able and willing as well. You could have somebody that's disabled and where it'd like to help in some way, can only do certain things. So all of that needs to be in the register.
And also you might have someone that's doing like QRZ, but of course you might have someone that's no longer is licensed, but no longer is really active in the hobby, that wouldn't be able to assist because they may not have any equipment or something.
Yeah. So at least a good register is a very good start, in my opinion, and quite pleased about that. Moving on. FM satellites expected to launch in November. And Chris, it's getting closer to our challenge of we got to go and work a satellite, isn't it?
It certainly is. It's an interesting story. So it's good we've got another. Well, it's another one going up. It's another CubeSat. So yeah, all good news. Just looking at a picture of it now. So it's called the RAD-FX Sat. It's going up. NASA are putting it up there. So it looks like there's a number of CubeSats being launched from this. So it's hitching a ride. It's calling it a secondary payload. So it's hitching a ride aboard the Joint Polar Satellite System, the JPSS-1 mission, which is launching on a Delta II rocket from the Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, on the November the 10th, so in a few weeks' time. And there are 4 CubeSats, including this particular one that's going up. So, it's got an FM. It actually sounds very similar to the FunCube satellite that went up from the UK, or built in the UK a few years ago. So it's an FM. It's got both an FM repeater, although I've got a feeling actually that the FunCube dongle has FunCube satellite has a transponder rather than a repeater. And it also does telemetry as well. So it looks like it sends telemetry information that can be decoded using some software you can download from this group. So yeah, similar-ish to the FunCube satellite that went up a couple of years ago.
Certainly sounds good fun. Dan, it's being launched from your country by a university that made it, I believe. So what's your feelings on all this?
Well, I think it's pretty cool. In fact, I'm going to get some more information about the scientific experiment that's on it. It says here, has payloads for the study of radiation effects on commercial off-the-shelf components. I used to be a test engineer, so I'm always interested in these kind of test topics.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, as I say, I've decoded the telemetry off the FunCube when it was up there, or when it goes over, and that was quite fun. So downloading telemetry and having a look at it and sharing information probably with them could be quite a good thing. So that'll be fun for you, Dan. Ed, satellites. Your thoughts on this one?
Just to add one comment, this is Fox 1B. It's a series of Fox satellites that are planned to be launched over about 2 or 3 years, if I remember correctly. Fox 1A is already up there. This is Fox 1B. And there'll be some others. I think it goes up to about F or something, but I could be wrong on that. But certainly there's a few more to follow. And yeah, there's something different on each one. So this one sounds like a fairly standard UHF VHF repeater where you transmit up with your FM handy talkie on 70 sems and come back down on 2 meters. And, probably depending where its orbit ends up, could be a relatively easy satellite to use. Could be one to use for your challenge.
Could very well be. So, yeah, let's hope it is, because our challenge is getting closer, Ed. Our challenge is getting closer. Moving on, FCC scraps telegraph regulations. And Dan, we talked a little bit about this before we started, but let's talk about this first, then we'll move on to the other thing that you're quite passionate about. Good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I'm sure it's a good thing. I mean, why have these things on the books when we're not sending telegrams anymore?
Yeah. Well, as I say, I think a lot of these regulations and laws and that, they get forgotten about, don't they? So
exactly.
So it's just people don't use it, so they forget about it. Guys, Chris, you anything on this one before we move on to Dan's second?
No, not really. I think we could before, haven't we, a little bit around some of the it seems to be that they are removing regulations. We did talk before the recording about perhaps that was part of I know Donald Trump's administration is very much about removing regulations and rules and things. And but I think, Dan, you were saying that this was happening before he came to power, so it looks like that's maybe not that's just a bit of a coincidence. But I suppose it makes, if these things are outdated and it helps us to move forward, then I think it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, well, this is also part of the Part 95 regs that we covered on a previous podcast, where I think the last time the 3 or 4 of us were together. So, it's another one of these things. You any thoughts on this one, Ed?
Yeah, just say it's. I think it's Ajit Pai, who's the chair of the FCC at the moment. One of his things when he came in was he wanted to simplify processes, remove them when they're not needed to save money and save complexity. I believe the FCC has had its staff numbers reduced and continues to have them reduced to save money. So the more regulations you can remove and more responsibilities as well, perhaps you can remove on checking these things, the easier it is to run the organisation. Yeah. So, in this particular case, I don't think anybody has anything against, from our point of view, from amateur radio point of view, that the telegraph regulations go away. But we have to watch out, or we don't, but somebody has to watch out that they don't go cutting too many regulations off to save themselves work. And in some of the other cases of the regulations that the FCC is supposed to manage, perhaps shouldn't be chopped. But this particular one on telegraph, I personally can't see any problems. And it seems to me, from the little things I've read about stuff in the States through the FCC compared to Germany, UK, Australia, etc., is that there's an awful lot of regulation of the radio systems, be they amateur or otherwise, and of course that's an overhead of cost for them.
Yeah, certainly. And Dan, you also mentioned here that the FCC ends decades of old rule designed to keep TV and radio under local control. And you were talking about radio stations don't need to have local studios or something now.
Well, right. So this is actually a much bigger deal as far as how it affects the U.S. citizens. So it used to be that local radio stations had to maintain a local studio in the communities they were located in. Well, now the FCC has moved to end that rule. So I think you get double speak on both sides, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of these big companies buying up small stations, installing basically remote operations in there. There'll be no local people anymore at these local stations, and you'll have no local content.
Yeah.
And I just think this is a bad regulation, or a bad regulation to get rid of.
Yeah, because it in many ways local means local, doesn't it? You should have local news and local people doing it, I would suggest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Chris, you any feelings on this?
Well, certainly that particular one, I agree that if you're not careful, you end up with, I suppose actually in a way, if you think about how companies work now, you used to have the local branch of your, particular company. You may go in and you may phone it, and now it's all seems to be a nationalised, you've got centralised call centres, and maybe it's a similar sort of thing. Rather than having a local radio station, you've now got a kind of a centralised model where it all comes out from one kind of place where it's all sort of managed, and I think in a way you lose something when you do that, especially in the media. Having local content coming from someone locally, perhaps with a similar accent to you, and sort of knows the area and knows what goes on, rather than someone that could be thousands of miles away. It doesn't really have an interest in what's going on locally. So I agree with Dan. I don't think that particular regulation is one that you want to get rid of.
Yeah, but kind of. And maybe Martin would give me a slap round the head for this one if he was here tonight. But we have this in the UK. Martin reads the traffic reports for the whole of the UK some weekends, and he can be on a station in Scotland 1 minute and a station down in the West Country another minute, and then a station in Wales. He's all over the place. So, radio stations do buy in content from other providers, and certainly weekend cover and things like that. So I hear where you're coming from, Dan, and I still think that radio should be local and should be with the people, but it's a sign of times where everybody's trying to make as much money by cutting their costs down. Ed, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it just reminded me, because you bring it onto the UK side again a little bit. Didn't we discuss a story about 2 months ago about a problem that occurred when about 40 commercial local radio stations went off the air, got no content to play because some IT engineer somewhere pulled one wrong cable in a data center, and the studio that was supplying content for all of these 40 stations all around the UK, so-called local, was located somewhere centrally, and when that went down, there was no local studios in some cases for them to get back on the air from, or if there was, they didn't have the setup anymore because it was all done centrally. So sort of what Dan is fearing is, I think, what's already in place in the UK from what we discussed a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do remember that story. I remember Martin Rothwell talking about it. He's almost, like you say, he's obviously got some experience of this, and he was a bit surprised that there wasn't like a backup or a secondary solution. So yes, that was you're absolutely right. There must be a level of this within the UK.
Mm. Yeah, and there are some big companies that have bought up a lot of radio stations all over the country, and effectively run them pretty much the same content, just all over. So it is a strange situation and a shame, but it comes down to costs. Everybody's reducing costs, and the cost of running the transmitter obviously is one cost, but the real estate of having a studio and staff to staff it and things like that, I suppose, are another cost, and they're all trying to reduce costs. So whereas Dan and I totally disagree with them not having local studios to be able to broadcast locally, from a business point of view, I can half understand it. But it's...
Well, sorry, Mark. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, but if you look at that situation where companies bought up a lot of local radio stations all around the country and feeds it, or can feed it with the same content, they basically made themselves a national radio provider, haven't they? By doing that.
Potentially.
Well, right. In one of the companies that's hot on doing this is a company called Sinclair, which apparently has is just going to run more, I hate to say it this way, but right wing and sort of quote unquote Christian programming. And it's just, I guess what it comes down to is, what's the societal implications of this? Yeah, we have business implications, sure, but there's societal implications too. And in this headlong rush to get rid of all these regulations, I don't think we're taking into account what the societal implications of all this.
Yeah. I suppose the other thing is that a big corporate buy up all the radio stations and impose what they wish to transmit. But if the general public don't like it, they ain't going to tune into it. So it's a bit of a strange one, I
think on Dan's point, so certainly here in the UK, I know there are regulations about who can own media organisations, not just radio, but television and the print media. And I guess nowadays, probably moving now into the internet media as well, social media and websites and things. I know there are investigations and things like the ownership of, I know certain, should we say, Australian media owners. There's been investigations there around whether he should be allowed to own certain satellite companies, for example, and television companies, for example. So I don't know if it's the same in the States with the FCC, but I know certainly in this country there's been inquiries and investigations, and there needs to be there needs to sort of prove that they're not going to cause that sort of political bias, for example, or if they're going to cause any issues there. So I don't know if that's the same in the States, Dan, or whether that's just completely open and you can do what you like with you on the station.
Well, yeah, you can do it. Really, you can do whatever you like once you own the stations, because again, a lot of those there used to be lots of regulations, like you had to do so much news, for example, but they got rid of those regulations long ago. So all the sort of the combined effects of getting rid of one of the regulations probably wouldn't have been the big deal, but getting rid of all these regulations is going to really have a big effect, I think. And I just don't think they're thinking about it.
So what you're saying, Dan, is, and this is a little bit tongue in cheek, and you probably slap me for it later, if I won the lottery tonight and I bought a radio station in the States, I could run the ICQ podcast 24/7.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
All right, because I'm sure I wouldn't be allowed to do that in the UK.
Oh yeah, no, you could do that. You could do whatever you want here.
Yeah, right. Oh well, I've got my fingers crossed. Maybe we'll go national in the US. Oh, stop. I shall behave now, Dan. I shall behave. Dan, you came up with another news story which we kind of liked, and this is our final news story for tonight. And it was to do with the old Radio Shack and what's happening with the old Radio Shack. And there's a number of independent franchisees that are still open. So would you want to lead with this one?
Sure. So what prompted me to add this to the list here was I saw a news story. The title is "Manager Reopens Jefferson City Radio Shack," and there was a company store that closed, like lots of the company stores, but it reopened very soon after as an independent franchisee. And I'd seen a similar story a couple of months ago, and I said, well, maybe this isn't quite a trend yet, but 2 stories on this is kind of interesting. And apparently, you can still get a Radio Shack franchise and operate as an independent dealer. And there's even a page on the Radio Shack website where you can email for more information. And I've emailed for more information, but I haven't received it yet. But according to the one story, there's still over 400 independent Radio Shack franchises open in the country.
Well, you see, Radio Shack in the UK used to be called Tandy, and I used to love going in and having a poke around them in the 1970s, and it was great, and there was interesting stuff. And then they kind of in the UK lost their way in the 80s and the early 90s, and went into selling sort of electronic toys pretty much, and that sort of was almost their downside. And I think around about 2000-ish they went out of business. Don't quote me exact date, but round about then they went out of business, and they were bought by a company called the Carphone Warehouse, Tandy were, and sold off all their equipment. I think they bought a number of their shops. But I've seen another UK electronics high street shop going a very similar route, and I don't know if they did that in the States. Did they just go into selling toys, electronic toys, rather than what they were known for, like their radios and electronic components?
Yeah, absolutely. First they got into the computers, right? You could buy Radio Shack computers, and that still was okay. That was still sort of in their line of business, but they never were able to really compete on price. And so then they got into selling toys, and then cell phones. They were just a big cell phone shop.
Dan, I've been over to the States a few times and been into Radio Shack. There was a massive section selling cell phones or mobile phones. That seemed to be their push was on those. And don't quite know how it works in the States. Certainly here in the UK, most phones are probably bought through the phone provider, the airtime provider. So I'm not sure if that model is used in the States, but I don't know if that perhaps put them at a disadvantage.
Well, that is the model here, and I'm sure Radio Shack probably had agreements with the providers. But that being the case, why wouldn't you just go to the Verizon store, the Sprint store, and get the phone directly? So I think they just made a lot of bad business decisions.
Yeah.
But I like this idea here. I don't know if it's really a viable business, but if you could sort of downsize a little bit, operate as a independent franchisee, maybe not have quite so much overhead, maybe they could make a go of it. I know here there's a real need for it. I get questions all the time. Where can I go buy some coax? Where can I go buy some fuses? Where can I go buy other stuff? And there's no place here in Ann Arbor anymore.
Yeah.
So instantly here in the UK, I think when Tandy disappeared, Maplin was the chain that kind of has really grown here in the last 10 or so years. So certainly there's a local Maplin store in most high streets now that sell similar sort of things. They sell sort of things that Tandy used to sell. So you can buy, components, you can buy kits, you can buy all the kind of electronic stuff that mainstream things like televisions and actually telephones, certainly radios, that sort of thing. But they also sell things like disco equipments and lights and mixing units and that sort of thing. So kind of very similar to what Radio Shack and Tandy used to sell. So, but they seem to be doing pretty well from what I can see. They're certainly growing, and certainly here in the UK.
Well, maybe that's a business model someone could get into here.
Yeah, but in my opinion, they are going the same route Tandy did. They are now selling lots of gadget toys as well. So they, in fairness, Radio Shack or Tandy, as they were in the UK, you often used to go in when they had a sale on or something. Exactly the same with Maplin's. They're great if you need something quick. Because there's a price premium if you want something quick, and we all accept that. But if you can wait a few days, you order it via one of the component dealers or online somewhere. But having somewhere where you can just wander in and get, say, a 5-volt regulator chip or whatever. But they don't stock hundreds of these things, so you have to be a little bit careful. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's these kind of organisations' business models and the competition that comes from online stores on the internet. Really, as you said, with Maplin, it sounds like they're doing the same thing as Tandy did. From my time in Australia, I saw Tandy disappear. Then Dick Smith's became, which was a similar sort of organisation originally. They turned to selling washing machines and TVs and all kinds of things, and the component section shrunk and shrunk. So that I think now the only chain that's left is J-Car, and they've pretty well stayed with components and such like. But yes, they're a little bit more expensive. It's always nice to go and have a look around, but like most amateurs do, you'd probably go in there when there was a sale on or something, which wouldn't make them a big profit. And in the meantime, they're holding all that stock. So I think, unfortunately, for these niche markets, and in a lot of ways, electronic components for hobbyists is a niche market, the internet's going to take over and all of these companies are going to disappear.
Yeah, and that's probably why they're selling toys. And we are our own worst enemy. Come on, we always got to buy.
I have to say, though, I think there's been a bit of a resurgence in the last sort of 5 years, where you now got the Raspberry Pi and the Arduinos and this whole maker community of people that are now making, constructing things. I think the move away from components and electronic stuff to kits, that sort of thing, I think that's coming back. There seems to be lots of, I think, back in the 80s it was quite common. People, when we had the BBC computer and probably similar in the States, and people were actually interested in how things were, not just using things, but actually how they worked. And I think there seems to be a bit of a resurgence in that. As I say, the Raspberry Pi came out a few years ago now, and I think that's driven quite a lot of people now into getting involved in construction. You can now buy things like 3D printers, and some of that is driving people's interest in electronics, etc. So I wouldn't be surprised if these Radio Shack stores stuck to their original product lines, which was more around the components and the electronics and the kits and that sort of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually started to do quite well.
Yeah, well, I would hope they would. So that's I think we all hope they would. So let's see how it goes, and let's wish them all the best of business going forward. Out of
interest, I don't know if you spotted this, and this may have been a joke. I think it may have been. There was a picture put up on Twitter by the lady that runs Adafruit, whose name I've temporarily forgotten. But she posted a picture of her holding some Radio Shack stock certificates, and there was lots of rumours about whether Adafruit had actually bought Radio Shack. Now, a huge amount of speculation on the internet after this picture was posted on the internet. That's right, Lee Moore-Freed is her name. Although she goes by her moniker, Lady Ada, I understand. But yeah, the pictures of her on the internet with these certificates. Now, I think it was actually a bit of a joke just to see what would happen. But certainly, there's lots and lots of internet speculation. This is a couple of weeks ago now it was posted, but yeah, I'm interested to see if they actually have bought Radio Shack.
Yeah.
I don't think they have, but I think it was a bit of a joke, that's all. But it's certainly lots of speculation on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, and if I ever open up my own Radio Shack here, I would want to do it the other way. I'd want to get lots of Adafruit stuff, and she sells through dealers too. And like you say, that might be a viable model for some local Radio Shack store.
Yeah. I think so. I think there's lots of big market out there now for these little kits and things, and people learning about electronics. I think it's the last few years. I think that's what when Martin, we've been to Germany, and that's Ed saw you over to Fruitside, and there's a huge maker fair there of quite young people that are playing around with electronics and building kits and building gadgets and linking them to the computer and doing all kinds of things. So I think there's some mileage there.
I think so. I think people do want to play. I think people want to modify. People want to. There is a certain amount of nostalgia as well. Old bits, old devices. People want to keep. they may have paid a fortune for them 15, 20 years ago, and they just don't want to part with them because they feel it's part of the furniture almost. So yeah, I agree with you. It'd be nice to see something like that. A good parts supply available in most places that we didn't have to go a long way for. So I agree with you guys. Okay, moving on. That pretty much closes the news stories. But now what I do is I have a quick wander around the table, see what the guys have been up to. Ed, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay, I'll jump in. As everybody knows who listens to this podcast, I'm quite interested in Summits on the Air, and I've been trying to battle the bad radio conditions on HF we've been having over the last few weeks. And I think, I'm trying to work out when it was, but I was actually down in the south of the Allgäu, which is southern part of Bavaria on the Austrian border, for a couple of nights, just a short break, and went out from the hotel up to the summit at the back of the hotel, and managed to work into VKNZL, just running about 20 watts and a dipole. And then went out last weekend to try and do the same from here, near to where I live here. Got absolutely nothing at all. So band conditions seem to be really down in the doldrums at the moment. And one of them things. Apart from that, nothing really on the radio side. Gone through a new smartphone. The smartphone I had went dead on me. The screen went funny on it, and been trying to get everything back to order on the new smartphone. But it's amazing how much you rely on those things. And apart from that, radio-wise, I said it's been mainly going out and trying to do some SOTA activations before the winter arrives.
Oh, it's good. It's good. And so it sounds like you've been real busy. Dan, have you been busy?
Well, we were just talking about building. My latest is I was on QRZ.com a couple weeks ago, and I saw an ad for a new company, or at least one I hadn't seen before, called Funk Amateur. And apparently it's a German company, and they sell a whole bunch of interesting little kits. And the one I purchased was the BX240 FA-VA4 Vector Antenna Analyzer Kit. And I got it yesterday and unpacked it, and I'm really quite impressed. I still haven't put it all together, but like some of the Elecraft kits, it's not like you're not really soldering components onto boards, because there's a single board and it has all surface mount components on it, and it's already built. So what you're really doing here is the final assembly, and it looks to me like a great device, and that's what I'm going to be doing tonight, is putting it all together.
Dan, to give you an update on Funk Amateur, it's actually the magazine that used to be the magazine for the National Society for East Germany, when there was East and West Germany, and they kept going after the wall came down. So the DARC have their CQDL magazine, but in parallel to that, you can subscribe to or even buy from the newsagent the Funk Amateur magazine, and it's actually a very good magazine, and quite often they'll have designs in there from amateurs that they then will put together as kits and sell the kit parts either partially assembled or fully kits or fully assembled. And I've heard a lot of people say the quality is very good, and the documentation on how to build the things are good as well. So I was really impressed by just the packaging. It came with a very nice box, and everything was packaged real well in there, and it's $140. I didn't mention the price. $140 shipped. No, that included the shipping and handling. So and it does a lot of fancy stuff. You can see SWR curves and all that stuff, and I think it's going to be great. Yeah, I mean, they've got a whole range of things, from very simple things to very complex ones, and so they've got a very good name in the marketplace over here in Europe as a place you can go to for kits. They also always have a stand at Friedrichshafen each year, and that's often interesting to visit, because you can actually get hold of the kits and look at them, or look at them through glass or whatever, depending what it is. And I actually subscribe to that magazine, so I get that magazine every month, and Some very interesting articles in there, and I mentioned actually before the show started, there's sections for different parts of the hobby in there. One of them is on satellites, going back to the satellite item, and there's like 15 new amateur radio satellites up in the last month. That they've listed them all and listed where you go to get the data for them and all this kind of thing. So it's actually a very good magazine, and the kit side of it. They also have a QSL card printing part of the organisation. So it's a lot of the organisation that used to exist in East Germany, and it just kept going, and actually from success to success. And in many ways, their magazine is better than the one from the DARC, in my opinion.
Very cool.
Right. Well, Dan, I'm gonna make a suggestion that at least go and have a look at the website and maybe download the manual. Being a CW operator, this feature in this episode is I talked to Hans Summers of QRP Labs, and he designed a QRP single band QRP transceiver for the IOTA 2017 the students made, and this is quite a phenomenal little transceiver. It's only 5 to 10 watts output, and CW obviously, but it does lots and lots and lots of other things, and he's selling them in the UK for £35. Sorry, £37. He said I robbed him of £2 last time I said that. I think it's £37, but it's States money, I would guess under $50, but
correct.
Certainly.
In fact, a friend of mine just has bought one.
He has.
I don't know if he's been shipped to him yet, but he's on the list. If not,
okay.
So I will get some firsthand knowledge of that.
Yeah. Well, I've sent them.
Sorry, doesn't it do Whisper as well as CW?
It does Whisper. It does CW. It's got its own test equipment built into it. It's got. It's even got down to having a micro switch on the PCB. So if you have forgotten your Morse key, you can still send Morse. Yeah.
I didn't hear about that. That's kind of amusing.
Yeah, but yeah, all right. Maybe you wouldn't be able to do it at the sort of speed you do it, Dan. But in fairness, if you're completely new to the hobby, or you're a SOTA operator and you're on the top of a hilltop and you've left your Morse key behind,
exactly,
you could certainly send her. So I mean that's the feature for this episode, and I had about a 20-minute chat with Hans Summers, and he's a really interesting guy. His manual for this thing is an absolute work of art. It's something like about over 100 pages, and it details completely everything you have to do and all the things it'll do. And just downloading the manual and having a look at it is well worth the time, I would suggest. But just a thought, Dan. I'm not trying to get you to spend $50, but. As I say, it might be something you'd be interested in.
Yep, I'll do that.
Yeah. So Chris, we've been around and done a few things recently, but then I disappeared out of the country, and you got very busy, didn't you?
Certainly, yes. I've been pretty busy, so I'm sure our listeners will have heard and maybe seen the BBC event we went to last week, which was fantastic. So we went to the opening of the BBC London Radio Group shack at Broadcasting House, where they have the call sign G8 BBC. That was fantastic. You will no doubt seen the videos and listened to the content from that, so I won't go over that again. What we didn't talk about on that episode, the last episode 251, was they actually took us round once we'd finished the opening, and we obviously met the Director General, etc., and that was all excellent. They actually showed us around the building, and it was really, really interesting. And we got to see various behind the scenes, shall we say, of the BBC and how it works, and it was absolutely fascinating. And a big thank you to Jonathan M5AEO for arranging that. That was we weren't expecting that, so that was really nice. And everyone was very friendly, and it was a fantastic day. I think myself and Colin and Martin Rothwell really, really enjoyed ourselves that day, and I think that came through on the hopefully came through on the recording. But yeah, that was really, really good. And in fact, the weekend they actually worked G8 BBC on 2 meters, so that was nice. I didn't actually meet Nick on the day. I don't think Nick was actually working that day, so Nick was the person that I worked on 2 meters. Unfortunately, I didn't get Nick's own call sign, but he works there at Broadcasting House, and he was on a break, so I had a chat with him on 2 meters. That was good. In other things I've been doing, so as we talked about earlier, Martin, we do have this challenge, and we haven't forgotten that we need to work satellites before our 10th anniversary. So at the weekend, I went and bought some bits to make some satellite aerials. So I bought some wire. I bought so essentially, I bought a few components there. So I've been looking online. I found a few homebrew, instructions for building an aerial for satellite use for 270 centimeters. I did also buy at the National Hamfest a few weeks ago. I did buy a duplexer for 2 meters and 70 centimeters, so that will be handy as well. That was a sort of second-hand £10 purchase. I thought that was quite a good buy. So that will also be part of that aerial. So just a case of now of following the instructions and putting that together. So hopefully, I might just try listening first, but when I feel brave, I may actually go on the air and actually tick the box to say that I've worked satellites, Martin. So then it'll be down to you to for you to do it as well. And then finally, last Thursday, myself and Martin Rothwell did a talk at our club about software-defined receivers. So you'll have heard a couple of episodes ago we did a feature on SDR Play. We had John and Mike we spoke to about their range of products. So I've been playing with mine ever since then, really. I've been quite impressed with it, and I may actually do a feature on that in the future. But essentially, have got mine now working in tandem with my Yaesu rig. So now if I tune the rig, it tunes the software-defined radio on the PC, or the receiver on the PC. But more usefully, I can now click on a signal on the computer and it actually tunes the radio to that signal, which is quite a nice way to operate. So been playing with that, and we're just sort of sharing our experiences with the club there. So not just about the SDR Play product line, but also around things like the Funku dongle, the AirSpy, and the RTL dongle. So we sort of took them through the range of devices that you can play with and their various characteristics. So that was great fun. I think you were there, Martin, weren't you? Hopefully you found it useful. So that's what I've been doing. I've been quite busy, I think.
Yeah. Well, it was a very good talk you and mine did, and not to take away, you've told what you did with it, but Martin also was decoding DMR with it. He had a piece of software that allowed him to decode DMR straight out, and that worked very, very well. So I was quite impressed with that. But I've spent, so pretty much going on from that, yes, I bought an SDR Play receiver, and about 3 days before I flew out to Cyprus, and threw it in the bag the last minute, installed the software on my laptop, away I went, and truthfully, my aerial was just my antenna was just a piece of random wire, and I didn't have a tremendous success on Cyprus, possibly because I had a pretty poor aerial, but I think it was more a matter of the band conditions were pretty poor. But it did work very well. I kind of got my head around how to use it. One of the things you find in Cyprus is that in the UK we have a calling channel of 145-500 on 2 meters. In Cyprus, the boys around the Pathos area sit on 145-550, and they sit on 145-550, and they just use that as their group natter channel, and they either call each other or end up having a net on that particular channel. And I was listening one day, heard very little on 145-500, obviously. So I put the software-defined radio on 2 meters and suddenly spotted there was a lot of traffic going on 550. Once again, that proved where to find them. Received quite a few good broadcast stations, and so I knew that it was working, even though I had a poor antenna. Did go out and play with the Cypriot boys twice. Went out down to their shack by the seaside. They've got a piece of land that has pretty much been loaned to them, where they've got antennas on, and like a big shipping container that's been converted into a shack, which they use, which is great fun. Went there twice and put my software-defined radio the second time there onto a decent aerial and actually heard a lot more. So I think my random wire was a bit rough, but anyway, it was a bit of fun. Did have breakfast with Richard, and Richard, I apologise if I get your call sign wrong, 5B4 AJG I think it is, and Richard and I went out for breakfast with our two ladies at 10:30, and I didn't get back to my apartment till 5:45, so it was a tremendously long breakfast, which turned into lots of coffee drinking, Chris, and fun. But I say it was a good day with Richard now on that one. Generally, the radio was pretty good out there, and as I say, if you go out there, we're certainly around the Pathos area, 2 metres, and look out for 145,550 is the frequency you'll find them on. Apart from that, only other radio I took was a Belfang UV5R, and as I say, didn't take any HF transceiver with me this time. So, I'd say it was all fun, boys. And I'm back now. And Colin says I've had to have my batteries charged. I'm back in the seat for a few more episodes. Hi. So, I think we've all had fun, haven't we?
I think we have, and glad you're back, Martin.
Yeah, no probs.
Yeah, welcome back on board.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU.
Great fun as always.
Yeah, good to have you on, Dan. Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Very welcome, glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Ed, and enjoyable as always, as I say. And Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Yeah, once again, nice to be here. Great fun as usual.
Yeah, and we've probably got to arrange our diaries because we must have a Belfast trip at some point in time, but we'll sort that out.
I said actually the other day, we're probably due a visit, aren't we?
Yeah, so we'll arrange that at some point in time. And Mr. Martin Ruffalo didn't make it this episode, M0SGL, so I didn't get into trouble. And he didn't bait me to get into trouble, so I'll catch up with him as well at some point in time. So, 73 is all.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time for a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. And we start off with news here in Australia, where amateur ham radio operators in Australia have been reminded about the journey they can have in renewing a call sign that may have lapsed. Holders of expired licenses have to contact the WIA, who need to issue a recommendation for a new licence application. One of the main reasons why many Australian amateurs suffer this process is because the Australian Radio Communications Act does not have a requirement to advise licence holders of their renewal date. Whilst the ACMA does its best to fill this void, in many instances a renewal notice is not received by the ham. An Australian amateur radio call sign is only a condition of a licence, and if the licence is not renewed, after 60 days the call sign will be put on a WIA public list on its website, and then 7 days post that, the WIA will issue the call sign recommendation to whoever wants it, with a ballot provisions applying for 2-letter call signs in some states. So this is a way that many amateurs in Australia can potentially risk losing their call sign, and I say they're advised to check their licensing documentation, etc., and set up renewal notices in calendars to remind them of their renewal dates and make sure they don't lose their valuable call signs. Back to the UK, and online amateur radio club Essex Hams have published an update on the proposed new syllabus for amateur radio foundation, intermediate and advanced RSGB exams. And the proposed new syllabus, which is to be finalised by the end of this year, with the first exams taking place from January 2019. So we'll post a link on the ICQ podcast website of this syllabus review for anybody who's a trainer or thinking of coming into the hobby. Would certainly worthwhile checking out on those changes to the UK system there. Well, now we head over to our features episode, which is a feature with Martin, M1MRB, with Hans Summers of QRP Labs. I hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, I'm at the National Hamfest. I'm here with Hans Summers.
Good morning, good afternoon rather, sorry.
Or sometime in the day. Depends when they listen.
It's been a long weekend.
Yeah, I've been trying to get this interview with Hans since yesterday morning, and every time I've come by the stand, he's been absolutely manic. You've got some terrific products on the show here today, and this CW kit that does CW and more that you produced for the RSGB Yota 2017 is really flying off the stand like hotcakes, isn't it, Hans?
It is. So now we've launched this on the 21st of August and we've had over 1,300 orders to date. It's just been crazy. And we originally made 500 in the first batch, so I've had to make 2 more batches, 1,000 more kits, and they're still selling.
So, you know, this is it's almost a runaway success, this particular product, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think it's fair to say that you could have asked for double, maybe 3 times the amount of money for the functionality. Do you want to run our listeners by the functionality built into this particular kit?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It could easily have gone for triple the price. But I believe in fair pricing, and I like to spread as many kits around as I can, and people enjoy that. So it's a high-performance receiver, a high-performance transmitter, Class E PA, so it doesn't require a heatsink. The receiver itself uses a quadrature sampling detector like most SDR front-end receivers. Very high dynamic range, very high IP3. I have already reports from people who've built them and say it's giving the weak signals just the same as their Yaesu or ICM or Kenwood. So it's all analog, it's not SDR, it's all analog, but it's all helped along by the microprocessor, which is an Atmega 328, the same processor used in the popular Arduino series of boards. And that lets you squeeze in tons and tons of functionality. So I've put dual VFO, split operation, RIT. There are 12 message presets, 16 frequency presets. There's a keyer built in, CW decoder built in. A very important feature is it has all its own alignment and test equipment built in as well. So it's a signal generator which will inject a signal back into the front end, which you use to align the bandpass filter very, very simply. So it takes a few minutes to set up and align without any additional test equipment at all. It's easy to build. It's all through-hole components. A lot of people do not like surface mount components. There are 2 surface mount components, chips, but they're already soldered on the board by the PCB factory. So it's quite easy to build. Proof of that, it was built by 90 young people in the RSGB Yota Summer Camp that was hosted this August in the UK. And I had very great feedback from those guys. They really enjoyed it. People said it was a highlight of the event, building this kit. It's very nice to perform on air. It's very nice to use. It has full QSK or semi-QSK mode, the keyer, the decoder, all the features, the test equipment built in, signal generator. You can configure it to show a battery icon on the screen if you want to use it for portable operation. So I think, there's a ton of functionality in this thing at a very low price, and that explains why I'm so busy at the moment.
It certainly does, Hans. I mean, I was at Yota and I watched a number of the youngsters there build these, and some of them had never built kits before, and they were sitting there quite happily working in groups. And all right, the one for Yota 17 was they had a 17 meters version, which I think you advised them against, but this will work on other bands, won't it?
Yes, it's working on 80 meters, 60, 40, 30, 20 or 17. So when you buy it, you specify your choice of band. 40 seems most popular, 20 meters is also very popular. I'm going to also test it on 12, 15 and 10 meters, so in future I should be making those available as well. So it is a single band kit, which is determined by how many turns on the torage you put and the components you fit, but available for any of those bands down to 80 meters. The assembly is very easy. It's all through-hole components, and there's 138 pages in the instruction manual, step by step, so people don't seem to have any difficulty with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen your instruction manual, and I've also seen it here on the stand. And in fairness, if you can't build it, there's something seriously wrong with you, because there's pictures of everything you need to do, the components you're fitting, you label it all up. It is step by step. It's probably easier than the Heathkit manuals that us older ones remember. It's very, very well laid out, so I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I had quite a lot of good feedback, and other people have also compared with Heathkit and said it's better than that. So I suppose these days we have more luxuries with digital word processing, photo editing and so on, so we can do a better job than Heathkit could do. There's few problems I've heard of with construction. Does not come from people who are inexperienced builders. It comes from the other end of the spectrum. People are experienced builders, and they skip reading bits of the instruction manual which are important. And that's why early on in the manual, I write there, don't be a hero. Even if you're an experienced constructor, read the steps and follow them and understand them. Don't be a hero and try and do it without reading instructions. So I think people are a danger to themselves, and usually the problems are by the more experienced constructors, not the less experienced ones.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one of the things is that when you get a new kit, a lot of people, it's almost a race to get it finished. They rush. And when I build kits, I like to just sit back and take my time. And I think it's actually as much enjoyment out of building it than it is to rush. And so I enjoy the quiet time to sit and build it. But the sense of achievement when you get a kit like this on the air and you start receiving things and you start getting it on the air far outweighs buying a black box.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have a tremendous satisfaction every time I use this now. I've operated the 40 meter, 20 meter and 17 meter versions. I forgot to mention earlier, it has a straight key on the board itself, which is a micro switch. And people initially laugh, well, how can you use a micro switch? There's a straight key, a vertical key, but you can, and it works very well. And I haven't had any complaints about bad keying. So yes, you get a tremendous sense of satisfaction with operating something you've built yourself. There's also a very detailed section in the assembly manual about explaining how the circuit works as well. So hopefully it's educational too, and you get some idea of learning how it all gets put together.
Yeah, I was to say that's another good thing. And I was about to mention your key, a little micro switch key, which means that, let's be honest, it was built that way, obviously, for the Yota thing. So not everybody was going to have a key, but equally, if you take this mountaintop in SOTA or whatever, and you accidentally leave your key at home, or the cable breaks on your key or whatever, and you're on the mountaintop, it's not a wasted trip, is it?
It's a very good point. Very good point. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, personally, I use a straight key. I've never used a keyer, a paddle, but obviously this has the functionality. You can plug a paddle in, standard 3.5mm socket, but I like using the key on the board. It's kind of quaint way of doing it.
So that's a lovely little kit you've got in front of me, and you're selling it at the moment for £35 in the UK.
£37.
£37. Sorry, I'm robbing you £2. No, £37. My apologies. A lovely little kit. You've also got some other pieces of kit on the table. I believe these are Whisper devices.
Yeah. So originally the QRP Labs kit started off with this QRSS transmitter, which is QRSS is very weak signal, very slow speed Morse. Because of the slow speed, you get very narrow bandwidth, and that leads to a very high signal to noise ratio. So 100 milliwatts is enough to get you global coverage with such weak signals. It later evolved into a series of kits I started calling the Ultimate, and then it was Ultimate 2, Ultimate 3. We're currently Ultimate 3S, and literally thousands of these have been sold. I think about 4,000 in total now, the Ultimate 3 and Ultimate 3S kits. And they don't just do Whisper, they also do the other slow signal speed modes, the QRSS, FSK, CW, but also other weak signal digital modes like JT9, JT65, Pi4, Opera. The basic kit costs about £25 in UK terms, and you can then add to that by adding a relay board, more low-pass filters, so you can get it 6 bands and have it alternating between those 6 bands with different configured transmissions. You can add the GPS receiver kit, which I sell as well, which disciplines the frequency and sets the time very accurately. There's a receiver module that plugs on the back if you want to do reception as well. And there's a 5-watt PA module. So it's a very modular setup. A lot of people just start off with a £25 basic kit, and then as their fancy goes, they buy more modules. Or some people start at the other end, they buy the whole set and build it all up, 6 bands, GPS, everything. We have a nice aluminium extruded case as well, which is very popular. For the vast majority of us who are not very good at hammering metal, me included.
Me too.
So that's been kind of the flagship product for a while, and then spin-off from that was a VFO signal generator kit, which is based on the same set of modules with different firmware, which has a coverage of 3.5 kilohertz up to 200 megahertz. That's very popular as well. There's a clock kit for shack clock, GPS disciplined, always accurate. A lot of people are using the low-pass filter modules and the band-pass filter modules in their own homebrew construction as well. We get a lot of orders just for those because it's a nice, convenient building block for your own homebrew transceiver if you're building it. So that's been the traditional line of kits for QRP Labs for the last few years since we started. But now it's really nice to kind of step into another sort of sub-market of amateur radio with the CW transceiver. And looking at, from the looks of it, it's really started off well, and hopefully will evolve into a series of new products, new product line.
Yeah, well, that sounds really great, Hans, and it's nice to see that you're still producing kits that people can actually build, because as we go more and more into black box operating, let's be fair about it, a lot of amateurs are black box operators. They never get the enjoyment of building something and seeing it work themselves. Having kits like this is just something so worthwhile for our hobby, and I think you're making it really cost effective, so that's good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the wonderful things about our hobby is there's so many facets to it. You can bounce signals off the moon, you can go and climb on an island or a mountain, or you can do contesting. For me, I've always enjoyed constructing. That's always been my thing, designing and building. I think more and more people are doing it now. I think the construction went through a bad phase where it was hard to get components and everyone was buying the black boxes. But now the internet has made sharing a project with other people and finding information and finding sources of components so easy. So I think construction is really on the up. And a lot of people have been inspired by these kits to build things who hadn't previously built things. And you get a lot of people who are scared to start with. Can they manage it? But the instructions are all step by step. We have the great support from the builder community or from QRP Labs themselves, from me. So people always get it working in the end. I have a 100% working target where everyone is, I want to get their kits completely working in the end. So yeah, I think it's really becoming more popular building kits. And with the microcontrollers, we can add all this functionality and add a lot of functionality which couldn't be done a couple of decades ago. So that's also really a contributing factor. Yeah.
And I suppose with the microcontroller, if you decide to add extra functionality, or if somebody wanted to, is your code open software open or not? I don't know. Sorry, I'm asking you an awkward question.
It's not an awkward question at all. I mean, it's a religious question, you could say, right? Because there are some people who believe everything should be open source, and there are others who don't. I did not go down the open source route, and there are several reasons for that. We had a bad experience a few years ago where one of the products was cloned, and after that decided not to open the source. Nowadays you get a lot of Chinese companies cloning the kits that are produced in UK or US, and so that was another risk. The other problem with open source is it's quite, you think it should be less work, and I think it ends up actually quite a lot of work, because you have to deal with a lot of people asking questions. Well, why did you code it like this? How can we do this? How can we merge back in this functionality, and so on? So it's not open source. Having said that, I do take a lot of requests from people if they want firmware enhancements, and I always consider those. The Ultimate series of kits have been through a series of firmware enhancements. I mean, it literally started off with just QRSS, and now it is a whole heap of mode. I don't even think I included them all in the list I mentioned before. And that came about by people requesting addition of this functionality, that functionality. Even the CW transceiver kit has already had some firmware updates which have got more functionality that people have requested. So we have actually on the board itself a 2x3 pin programmer header, and the firmware is not open source, but the compiled hex files are published, and so people can upgrade their own firmware. So as the new functionality is added or bugs are fixed and so on, that functionality can be installed on your own devices. You just need a simple AVR programmer. They're only about $3 including shipping from eBay, and that's good enough to do all the updates.
Well, that was a very good answer, and I'm sorry if I asked you a slightly loaded question. Hans, I've kept you a long time. There's lots of people been trying to buy these. very quickly before we leave, give us where people can find you, and if they wanted to purchase one, where would they go?
Just go to the website at QRP-Labs.com, and everything is online. We take a PayPal payment. If you do not have a PayPal account, you can pay by credit card by selecting the PayPal guest option, and it will take you to a credit card checkout. If people don't even want to do credit card, I try to accommodate, so email me. People sometimes do a bank transfer to UK bank account, is fine. I've had people email me cash in the post, just banknotes, that works too. Not email, post me banknotes. So I try to accommodate that. But yes, everything is online from QRP-Labs.com, and you'll find it all online, along with all the manuals and the discussion group. All of that's on there.
So that's great news. So I'd like to thank you very, very much for your time, Hans. I know it's been a busy show. We've been trying to get hold of you for like 36 hours. But thanks for your time.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get to speak to you yesterday. I actually didn't even leave my table for a toilet break yesterday. It was crazy. Friedrichshafen was the same in July, but worse because their show opens at 9 and closes at 6. So it was a longer day to go without a toilet break.
Yeah, we was there, but thank you, Hans.
Thank you.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, guys, I really hope you enjoyed the feature with Hans Summers from QRP Labs. Certainly his kits took a lot of feedback and a lot of interest from both the Jota event he supplied kits to, and also from the Newark Hamfest. So certainly his stall was very, very busy, and it took us a long time, Dad, didn't it, to catch time with him, to have a chat to him about his kits. And certainly what I enjoyed listening to the feature was Hans's spirit of ham radio coming through, about how it's all about the kit and not necessarily about the money, isn't it?
Certainly is. I've met Hans a few times, and he's a very, very nice guy. I mean, very, very talented guy as well. And, he's so nice and gracious when you talk to him. He doesn't talk down to you. He's really passionate about what he's doing. And he's done a lot of very, very interesting projects over the years. So his website is well worth a look. But real nice guy, I'd say.
Yeah, no, exactly. I certainly agree, and it certainly came across that way, didn't it, in fact? So, as I say, guys, hope you enjoyed that there. We've got YouTube video content as well of that interview as well, going to be published out to the website as well. So check out ICQpodcast.com in a day or two, and that video link should be there for you as well. Well, so we need to wrap up this show, episode number 252. As always, we'd like to thank the monthly and annual subscription donors for keeping the show advert free. Please feel free to visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where I say you can help keep the podcast show advert free. Anything you send away is always greatly appreciated. We'd like to suggest, as I say, you also check out the Facebook group, our Twitter handles, at Colin Butler and at M1MRB for the latest amateur radio news that we try and publish. Sign up as well for the email newsletter to be kept up to date as well with the news stories going out to the website. We're trying to get more and more content on the website there, so there's certainly content there for you guys to check out. And I say that probably about checks out the bits for finding information until we do the show in a fortnight's time. In the meantime, we'd like to thank Chris Howard, M0TCH, Dan Romanchik, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ed Durrant, DD5 Lima Papa, for taking part in the news service. I say thanks, Dad, for sharing that, and I think that just about rounds up everything. I think we've just about ticked all the boxes, haven't we, Dad?
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure doing the round table again. So I was probably more on it this time after my holiday. So, yeah, I enjoyed doing it, and I'm probably back to full speed now. So that's a good one.
Exactly. You're a man fueled with iced coffee from your trip there, and certainly back on the money. Well, we're talking about drinks. Let's get Mum a cup of tea and a biscuit. So I better let you head off and get that fixed up for her.
No problems. I'll make you a cup of tea in a second. But, yeah, that's all great. So I'll say 73s to you, Colin, your XYL, and your harmonics. We haven't done that for a long time. But most especially, 73s to all our listeners who download this podcast. We really do appreciate them.
We certainly do, guys. 73s all. See you in a fortnight time.